In collaboration with AB Capital Securities Inc., Global Strategy Real Estate presents to you the weekly stock market wrap-up, posting every Friday of every week.
では、皆様、こんにちは。今週もですね、AB キャピタルとの生ライブを始めていきたいと思います。ではですね、今週もQ&A の方を前半部分に、お答えして、で後半は今週のマーケットの、アップデートですね、ウィークリーラップアップで、マーケットのお話、個別銘柄のお話をしていきたいと思います。でですね、本日、パネリストとして参加しているのが、日本語の松下と、家村で、弊社の、フィリピン側のスタッフ、マリアンで、AB キャピタルの、プロアナリストとしてレクスターさんとランスターにお越しいただいてます。ではですね、早速今週も質問いただいてますので、2つですね、今週2つ質問ありまして、1つ目が、機関投資家の割合、フィリピン、証券取引所の、投資家の構成について知りたいということで、機関投資家、個人投資家、それから、ローカルですね、フィリピン人投資家、いろいろ割合があると思うんですけど、これがどういった割合で今構成されているのか、これが1つ目ですね。2つ目が銀行株についてで、長期的な目線で見て、今後、より成長しそうな、銀行株、どんな銘柄がありますかということで、この2点、早速聞いていきたいと思います。ではですね、家村さん、よろしくお願いします。
じゃあ Q&A の方はこんな感じで。
そうですね。今週こういった形、来週はそしたら機関投資家
ちょっと機関投資家の話をね、僕聞きたいんですね。個人的にというか実際かなり重要だと思うんです。その市場の情勢を見るのに。はい。
ぜひ皆さん、また来週も、ご参加いただければ、この続きの話を聞けると思いますので、ご参加の方よろしくお願いします。というわけで、前半のですね、Q&A の方は、ここにて終了させていただきまして、後半は、マーケットのラップアップですね、今週のマーケット情報、個別銘柄情報のアップデートをしていきたいと思います。ではですね、マリアン、let's get started our weekly wrap up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly stock market wrap-up with AB Capital Securities Inc. And today we have Mr. Lance to give this week's stock market report.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Lance, and welcome to this week's market wrap. Okay, so first off, with the U.S. markets last week, negative sentiment was prevalent given concerns on inflation as well as overvaluations. So U.S. inflation for April spiked to 4.2% versus the 3.6% estimate by Dow Jones. So that was the fastest inflation growth since 2008. And for the Philippines, some economic news, first quarter GDP contracted 4.2%. Versus the 3.2% median estimate, so it's worse than expected. Another thing that weighed on the market sentiment last week was the MSCI rebalancing announcement. So several index issues saw downgrades across the board. Next, BSP keeps interest rates unchanged. And again, last week, several institutions again cut their growth forecast for the Philippines this year. So Moody's Analytics cut its growth forecast just to 5% growth, while Fitch Solutions cut its growth forecast for the Philippines down to 5.3% this year. And finally, banks' NPLs ratio hit fresh 11-year high of 4.21% in March, while bank lending shrank 4.5% in March, which was the most in 17 years. And some corporate news, out of the 22 index companies that released full-year results, 10 companies were behind, 9 were ahead, and 3 were in line full-year consensus earnings estimate. So on a week-on-week basis, the index was up 11 points. So for last week, the index briefly fell in the 6,000 level, which was the lowest for this year. However, given bargain hunting, the index went back up in the 6,200 level. And in terms of foreign transactions, net foreign selling persisted for the 13th straight week last week. it accumulated to 2 billion pesos, and year-to-date net outflows accumulated to 52 billion pesos. And our outlook for this one is still the same. We continue to expect net foreign selling to persist most of the days, given that vaccinations has still been slow. It's not yet been fast enough to significantly decrease the number of daily cases as well as positivity rate. So for May, average daily cases are just at around 6,600 per day, versus last April's daily average of around 9,600 cases per day. However, as I've mentioned, positivity rate remains high. It's still more than 10%. And most active cases are still in the Greater Manila area, which is bad for the Philippine economic recovery, given that the Greater Manila area accounts for more than 60% or about 60% of the total Philippine economy. So having said that, year-to-date market performance, the Philippine stock market is among the worst performing in the region, down 12.2%. And in terms of PE, we're trading at the premium versus the regional average of around 16.4 times. However, compared to the index 5-year and 10-year historical average, which is around 18 to 18.2%, we're trading at a slight discount. And again, just to give you an update of the COVID situation here in the Philippines, vaccine rollout, about 7.7 million doses have arrived, with at least 2.5 million administered, 2 million with the first dose, and 500 with the second dose. So all in all, about 2% of the Philippine, or 2.4% of the Philippine population have been vaccinated. So right now we have about 3,500 vaccine sites, and as I've mentioned, we're seeing easing cases in the country. However, it still remains high. Again, back in November to February of this year, we're just seeing around 1,300 to 1,800 cases per day. So relatively, we're still high at this point. So having said that, for our market outlook, we continue to expect to see weakness in the market given the string of negative news. As I've mentioned, several institutions have been downgrading the growth forecast of the Philippines since last month. COVID situation remains to be bad, and the economy remains to be in bad shape. As I've mentioned, GDP contracted 4.2%, so we're still lagging in terms of economic recovery among ASEAN peers, despite having the worst performance last year. So which means we're still in bad light among foreign investors. However, for the past couple of days, we've been seeing some bargain hunting, which suggests that a lot of investors are still expecting this year to be a recovery year. So if you have a long-term time horizon, we think that this is a good time to pick up bargains. So some key events: Monday-Nissan offer period will be from May 19 to May 25. And this is the list of the earnings call for the different companies. So for this week, we're still looking at a support level at 6,200 and 6,000, with major resistance at 6,400. And again, for our stock picks, we've included again more of banks, since we figured that once the economy shows signs of a stable economic recovery, we think that cyclical stocks such as the banks will be gaining a lot of traction. So we like BDO, BPI, Metro Bank, PNB, and Security Bank. And for the more conservative investors, we suggest you go for telcos such as Tel, Globe, and Converge. So these companies, so for Tel and Globe, they have high dividend yields, and for the telco as a whole, they still have a good growth potential here in the Philippines, since there's a lot of untapped markets here in the Philippines in the fixed broadband space. And for the holdings, these are our value picks. So as you can see, these companies are trading below their book values. They have price to book of less than 1. So we like AGI, DMC, LTG, and GT Cap. And finally, for our energy picks, since once the economy reopens, once restrictions lighten, there will be more demand for energy, which we figured will really benefit FGen and FPH as well. So to aid you with your trading, again, we included resistance and support levels. And finally, Again, the companies in the negative territory, the deeper they are in the negative territory, the deeper the discount to their 10-year historical average PE, which is a good bargain, such as for Pure Gold and Mega World, which have been seeing a pickup the past few days. And the companies in the positive territory are the companies trading at a premium versus their 10-year historical average. And that's it for this week's market wrap.
Ran-san, could you explain about the MSCI rebalancing, page 19? Hello?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I can
MSCI
take this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Page 19.
Yeah, so this one is actually the latest index rebalancing from the MSCI. So essentially, we're going to see a lot of foreign outflows until the close of May 27th, which is the deadline. So to recall, there were actually 3 companies that were deleted in the MSCI. So those are AP, Pure Gold, and Mega World. So we expect significant outflow for those 3 companies. In fact, the share prices of those 3 companies have already went down from the previous week. So, but we actually view this as a buying opportunity, a buy on weakness. Especially, we don't see any rush for you to get in. I think a good day to accumulate would probably on the latter part before the deadline. So once we start to see continued outflow on these companies, so I think maybe a few days before the deadline would be a good pickup as well. And we've seen that already. I think right now EP is trading at around 21, 22 pesos. That's about maybe 50% discount already to the prices we've seen a year ago. Pure Gold would be another company that has been declining the past few weeks, as well as Mega World. So the downward pressure on those 3 companies will definitely be significant in the next few days until the deadline on the 27th. But generally, yes,
Deadline 27. Okay.
May 27. But generally, it's a net outflow for the Philippines. That's why we're seeing continued weakness also in our market. We're hovering at a 6.2 level. And we expect the market to further dip to about 6,000 level. So I think that would be a good buying opportunity already in good entry already in the Philippine market.
Okay, could you tell me how do we see this table? Or for example, AP minus 58.4
$1 million.
$1 million. What do you mean? This is stock
outflow.
market cap?
Means
Outflow.
So that means they need to liquidate around 107 for AP. For I guess we can use AP as example. So that means they should liquidate 117 million shares. So that's roughly around $58 million. So they need to exit for them to rebalance.
Meaning MSCI sell 117 million.
Net sell.
Net
Yes,
sell.
that's right.
MSCI net sell at the time and the
So
days
that
to trade.
That means that's a rough estimate on how many days they would liquidate those shares. So if the days to trade is 50 days, then that only means that the selling pressure would be significant since they only have they only have until I believe next week. So if it's the 18th today, then that gives you essentially an idea how much they need to sell. So that means on a normal basis, if you follow the average daily turnover of Aboitiz Power, normally it would take you 51 days for you to sell 117 million shares or roughly $58 million. But in this case, they're gonna do it in maybe 2 weeks. So that means that the selling pressure would be heavy, on the heavy side.
MSCI would sell 58.4 million US dollars in the next 2 weeks. They are going to sell.
Yes,
Selling pressure.
right.
Selling pressure.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay.
This one is from the announcement date. So they could have sold already part of the 58 or part of the 117 million shares that they're supposed to liquidate.
Why MSCI selling those Philippine stocks, especially AP Gold?
Oh, this is part of their quarterly index review. So what they do is try to rebalance their portfolios. Rebalance their portfolio. So this is not just for the Philippines, but essentially for global markets. Since the Philippine market was lagging versus the rest of the region. So the amount of outflows for the Philippines is quite magnified compared to other markets in the region that have performed fairly well in the past quarter. As mentioned by Lance, it was mentioned earlier, one of the slides, that the Philippine market is the worst performing market in the region. So if you're a fund manager, you'd try to rebalance it, sell more on the Philippines since it's lagging. So essentially, your allocation for Philippine stocks should be smaller, since of course it was lagging versus other markets in the region. So that makes it that makes the Philippine stocks less relevant to foreign investors.
So basically the portion and the percentage of Philippine stocks allocation is getting lower in the MSCI index. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
precisely.
Many institutional investors look at the MSCI, watching the MSCI portfolio, and they are going to do the same way, right?
Yes, that's right. So So if your market performed fairly well, let's say for example Taiwan or those markets that perform fairly well, then I would assume some of their blue chip companies were added in weight. So it was the opposite. So in the case of the Philippines, since it lagged the past quarter, they're trying to reduce their exposure in the Philippines.
I see. I think opposite way. The Philippine stock is really really cheap at the moment. So MSCI buy more Philippine stocks because of the bargain price. But they do the opposite. They do the opposite.
Yes, of course. As an investor, you'd want to be a contrarian. You'd want to sell when there's blood on the streets. But in the case of MSCI, they have certain they have certain guidelines that they need to follow.
This is MSCI's emerging market index.
This is for the Philippine index, the global standard index.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, the global standard index is comprised of several companies across the world. So in this case, AP, Pure Gold, and Mega World were deleted in that index. So they were downgraded into a smaller basket. So when you're downgraded into a smaller basket, that means your allocation for those companies should be reduced.
I see. Okay, thank you. And the last mentioned about the GDP contract is minus 4.2%. Is this minus 4.2% from last year or from last quarter?
Yes, year on year. So
year on year. Oh, okay.
Yes. But on a quarter basis, it actually grew 0.5%.
Grow?
Growth 0.5%. Expansion.
0.5% positive. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. That's all my question today.
Mr. Lester, Mr. Lance, Yumura-san, Machusito-san for joining us today. And that's it for our weekly wrap up with AB Capital Securities Inc. Thank you and see you again next week.